it's me, in the guise of the last Old Testament prophet. Yeah, no, I'm not actually that old. Giving you the same prophecy that all the others giving you, except a little less artistic flair and a few more data points. Okay, if you want to see these things, there's nobabies.net. You can find that on the internet, I'm sure. And when you do, you'll see this stuff that you can read, how to get a hold of me, and then you can get the movies in YouTube links, and then the YouTube scripts for the movies. This is movie number what? I'll tell you in a moment. Yeah, right. Okay, it's movie 56, Prophecy 11. This is the bitter false hope of populism. I think it was the 1970s. I went to Drury Lane Theatre in London to watch an animated show. It featured three philosophers who went to an island where they could think. One thought up truth, capitals, one beauty and one good. Most of the fun of the show was watching beauty and good beat each other up. And it was an animation, of course, and one monster would retreat over the horizon and he'd rush forward and fill the screen. Eventually, truth produced the nuclear bomb, and that terrified them, and they all left the island. People didn't think about anything but the bomb in those days, seems to me, and so it was a nice little moral. Imagery in the movie was good. There are the cartoons, snorting monsters beating each other up, and it's kind of a good icon for globalism and populism. Plot analogy is loose. The philosophers realize if the war escalates, everyone will die, but with the globo-populist struggle, prolonged contract, or victory on either side results in killing everybody. Should know that by now. If not, go read the first 32 scripts, because it's the most important thing you'll ever learn. For me, it's easy enough to choose a sentimental favorite. Globalism grows by warfare and by immigration that's a torment to the citizens, higher rate murder of the crimes, no concern to the rich who are running globalism with their heavily armed bodyguards, and all with the intent of making the obscenely rich even richer. I read and I suspect that it makes them more obscene, as well powerful people could, in theory, and maybe in fact, duped into doing things that would render them subject to blackmail. For instance, the UK royal family, who I long loved, has never breathed a word about the globalist agenda. Has changed London so much for the worse, right out their front door. And that failure is enough to make me suspicious. Then, of course, there was this fella, Epstein, who was thought to have material to blackmail a bunch of rich people, powerful people. Found dead in his cell. They're calling it suicide. You know, they found him with choke marks on his neck 3 weeks ago, and they called that a suicide attempt, but they didn't have him. Well, at any rate, they have ways to prevent that sort of thing. Evidently, they were not operative. It's either homicide or negligent homicide. Anyway, it stinks. As I wrote this, 9th of August, Yellow Vest protests entering their 39th straight week in France. Macron, their president, came out of nowhere, suddenly had the funds and, more importantly, the capable staff to make himself president. He oversaw or there had been recently been pressure on people to buy diesel cars. Supposedly, it was easier on the environment. Paris was so gentrified that ordinary people couldn't rent in Paris. They had to commute, and then they slapped a tax on diesel fuel to discourage people from commuting. That did it. The French lost their patience with him. Um, in in all those months of protest, he has had the police put people's eyes out, cut their hands off, or cause their hands to be cut off, and he has never breathed a word of remorse. Their big national holiday was Bastille Day, and he was riding in an open-top car with Angela Merkel, a similarly powerful and hated globalist in Germany, and the crowd was booing them. Now, I've never seen a Nazi general standing up in his command car with his hands on the top of the windshield. Right? Never saw it. But boy, I've seen it in the movies, and that was exactly the pose he chose. Now that, remember JFK? He was sitting in the car, normal human being. Oh no, Macron's thinks that much more of himself. Easy to hate Macron. Has to be something weird in his head that lets him live with the shame. How can he stand it? You've got an entire nation, people who trusted you, who gave you substantial control over their lives, and now, having seen what you did, they probably turn around and hate you, and you don't quit. I don't understand it. I could not do it. If in some countries, if a leader were hated that much, he'd be in danger of his life. With France's long history of democracy, people will watch, docile as can be, wait for the next election. It's ironic that free elections seem to have made tyranny safe. Make no mistake, bringing in immigrants and giving them support, health care, and so forth, doing them no favor. It dooms their offspring to reduced fertility in the land, ultimately to extinction, along with the lives of the people who marry them, right? So you're not being a nice person letting people migrate into your country at all, period. So easy to be a sentimental favorite and to hate those globalists. That's not policy. What were the result of policies introduced by globalism's nemesis, populism, which means country belongs to the people, so the politicians have business to follow the wishes and interests of the people. And I don't know anything else that I wouldn't call theft or treason. Here's something I want to show you. But first, here's some bats in the enormous population of bats in the Carlsbad Caverns. Right? Lots of bats. There's a link, how to get to the links. During the spring and fall migrations, they found as many as 793,000 bats produced in the year 2005. There's seasonal fluctuations, daily fluctuations, and they put together a count. Lots and lots of bats, okay? And here is a commercially available bat box. All right, you got that? Bat box. I'll try not to drop it on your foot. Cheap enough. And this is not a plug because I've not tried to use this one or any. But there it is. That's a commercially available bat box. There are 3 chambers in it. If we looked at the bottom, you'd see there are 3 ways in. So let's see. Each chamber will hold 100 bats, and it's a 300 chamber box. They really got to be packed in there, don't they? why don't they have one chamber for 300 bats rather than three chambers of 100 bats each? Well, I hope you're kidding, but I'll pretend like that's a serious question. You remember the Sibley curve. Population size increasing there, population growth rate there, fertility, lack of kinship. And this is the curve, and that's found in 1,700 field studies of wild animals. Well, when you drop if you're, say, here, the population size of 100 bats, if you triple the size, you go closer to or past the balance point. 300 is probably here or maybe up in here, right? They're selling these boxes basically to benefit the bats. Make life good for bats, okay? And they've figured it out empirically that 100 is a better size for bat population than 300. It's ironic that the numbers look about right for humans too. They worked out what good population sizes were for bats, and it's about the same as for people, I think. But they haven't worked on people at all. They didn't even mention that it might matter. All right, well, obviously, all those hundreds of thousands of bats in the Carlsbad are not just one big mating pool. Everybody has his own little corner and travels together in the migration. The globalist vision of a single social pool, let's say 8 billion. Population of France is about 67 million, thereabouts, depends on where you look. Let's say populist France, with all immigrants having joined the society, we'll call 80 million. And then no further migration, right? It's about 1% of the globalist agenda. So when you go from globalist to populist, you go off by a factor of 100 closer to what is safe, like the bat box size. Okay, best bat population, probably somewhere between 100 and 300, we'll say 200. And that's probably close to humans. So calling that from there, from something the size of France down to a couple of hundred is a factor of 400,000. You got that? France is 400,000 times, well, divided by 200. So it's 2,000 times the size of a viable human population. Sorry, populism won't work. By itself would do no good at all. We'd still die out. First, the science, technology, engineering, mathematics population, and the ability to do these things runs in families. Those families will die out first because they're quite gifted, quite capable, and have been outbreeding for the longest. That leaves us the productive middle class trying to feed a world of 8 billion people with the technology that could feed 2 billion under the best of circumstances, and circumstances will be very, very bad because you don't have the capable people that set it up in the first place. You don't even have enough people to maintain it. The high-tech civilization that feeds almost all of us. Environmental havoc seems inevitable. All-out war seems inevitable. Highly probable. But it's irrelevant. Eventually there will be no babies. It does not matter whether it's a war or an environmental disaster. Populism could be a step in the right direction. After all, it's a factor of 100 from utter madness towards sanity. You only have to go another 400,000, and you're maybe you can survive. Um, but alone, I do not see how populism could delay our day of doom, our most unpleasant day of doom, for a single solitary day. Let's just click there and there. And I think the next prophecy will be a little more cheerful.